Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thank you from the bottom of our dark little hearts. They say every object has a history, a past we can never fully know, a wedding ring worn through decades of devotion, a chair that once rocked a crying child to sleep, a mirror that's seen too many faces. Most of the time, these things are just that, things, but sometimes they carry more than dust and memories. Cleaning out a house, you can sort through a lifetime of belongings, uncovering secrets. A task filled with faded photographs, old books, and forgotten trinkets. But something may be waiting in that house, and when you leave, it may leave with you. Welcome to the world beyond the veil. This is Geist.
So as a child, I was always interested in things like mysteries, ghost stories. I was always chasing the scare. I loved my Nancy Drew novels. I loved my ghost stories. Like the Scooby-Doo series, I just loved the mystery gang and trying to solve, a mystery at a castle or something. And then that continued into adulthood. Melbourne has a lot of culture and historical sites and buildings and lots of old history in the city. And there are ghost tours that will run through these places and point out various locations and landmarks. They will also talk about ghost stories from way back. I've been on several ghost tours through Melbourne and I've loved every single one of them. So in June of 2023, we found out that my aunt, so my dad's sister, my aunt's husband was unwell and that he had cancer. And not long after we found out, he actually passed away. They lived in a town called Kerrang, which was about 3 hours out of Melbourne. That then meant that my dad had to help my aunt clear out the house that they had lived in, and my aunt could no longer live on her own and she required assistance. So there was, we had to basically clear the house out of their possessions and bring her and move her back to Melbourne. Dad said that the house that they had lived in was a 100-year-old home in Kerrang. They had been flooded from their previous house and they had been moved to this property by the government, I believe. It was actually attached to the post office in the main street of Kerrang. It was actually the old Postmaster General's house. Kerrang's a very small town. You've got one supermarket, a couple of pubs, a main street, a couple of cafes, and that's about it. So very rural.
Carley took every opportunity to join her dad on this road trip because this house was right up her alley.
And I said to Dad, could I come and see the house? Dad then said, well, you can come and help me clear it out. Dad and I took a road trip one weekend up to Kerrang. Wanted to know all about it, like 100-year-old house. There's got to be a ghost story attached here. There's got to be some spirit roaming around. We had also learned about a big family secret prior to going up there. This had only come to light with the death of my uncle. What we had learned was that a very serious crime involving a death had occurred many, many years ago, and it involved a family member of my uncle's.
Out of respect for the family and the nature of this crime, we cannot disclose what happened. But the details were very disturbing. And it was the first of many secrets that this house had to offer.
The whole way up there, I was making little videos, speaking to camera and filming myself and my dad about how we were going to make a Netflix documentary about this haunted house. We were actually going up there to clean it out and remove all the possessions and move my aunt back. I had kind of turned it into a story in my own head. My dad, he's great. He just goes along with it. He just plays along with it. He gets my humour, and we were just joking and laughing the whole way up there. So it was a bit of a dad-daughter road trip, essentially. We drove up very early on the Friday morning. We arrived mid-morning, and Dad first took me to the house. As soon as I walked in, it was a scene. When we arrived, we had to enter from the back. Dad opened the gates, and there was a little backyard with a little patio, and you enter from the rear of the property. When we walked in there, it was in a state. I guess my aunt and my uncle had sort of hoarded a lot of items, and I don't believe that they'd actually had time to unpack from when they got moved from their original property. There was just stuff in boxes, and I think he had become unwell and it just never got done. Unfortunately, there was a family of mice also overtaking the house, so there was associated smells and things. This house had extremely high ceilings, stone walls, plastic kind of lino floors. It was really cold. It smelt really bad, and it was just a mess. It had like 5 or 6 rooms just off the hallway, so it was really quite an unusual layout. Of course, I'm in there taking photos and taking videos, and it was quite creepy, I felt. First day, we just had a bit of a look around to get the lay of the land, and I don't think Dad had really explained the extent of the items that we were going to have to remove. There were rooms of just stuff. Checked into the hotel and sorted out, and then we began our task first thing the next day.
The following day, the work on the house started.
We just gathered a pile of rubbish, a pile of things to take home, things that my aunt wanted to take with her to the new place that she was going. So it was a case of that goes in that pile, that goes in that pile, that goes in that pile type thing. So as we went along, we also learnt that my aunt's husband had enjoyed participating in an alternative lifestyle as dressing as a woman. We weren't aware of that, and my aunt had been supportive of that. My aunt basically started offering me things that were still in good nick, and because I hate I hate throwing out things, I love repurposing things, I began to make a collection of things that I was going to take home. The things that I took home included like a brand new TV, a freezer, a blender. There were some crystals. There were some books about true crime and ghost stories and things like that.
Along with these basic household items, some personal ones were taken as well.
My uncle had also kept a number of diaries where he had written down various things like the cost of fuel, the appointments that he'd taken my aunt to, his daily going abouts and tasks and chores. He'd written about my sister and my weddings and the detail about the food and how much it must have cost. And he had made meticulous detail about just all parts of his life. Because those diaries also contained identifying details and bank details and things like that, I thought it was best that we take those home and we securely destroyed them so we didn't just chuck them in a bin and they ended up in someone else's hands. So I took all of that kind of stuff. My aunt is a wonderful crocheter, and there were a number of blankets that she had made. Even though she took some with her to her new place, there were so many and they were just in such good condition and beautiful that I felt that they needed to be taken home and washed and given a new place to live.
As expected, Some extended family also dropped by the house.
So over the course of the weekend, some of my aunt's husband's grown kids obviously came and collected various items and possessions and things that had belonged to him. There was a bit of a weird vibe in the house the whole time. There were people coming and going, but at times there was a bit of an unusual vibe in the house. We ended up filling up the car completely with all of the things and driving back to Melbourne. We arrived home on the Sunday night. I began to sort out stuff and then put it away. I put the diaries in the spare room because I thought I'll just deal with them later. I'll securely destroy them somewhere. And I kind of forgot about them. My dad was planning on returning back to the property the following weekend, and he had to arrange a massive skip to clear all of the rubbish that we had collated. The night before he was due to go there, I feel I got a visit from my uncle. I'd gone to bed and I had this, I'm going to say I had this dream, but it felt like I actually had a visit from my now passed on uncle. When a family member passes away and there's kids on one side and then, there's a wife and there's kids from a previous marriage and all of that, there's always issues with family drama, let's say. In my dream, what I remember, and I remember this very clearly, and that's why I think it was more than just a dream, because I can tell you exactly everything. We were back in the kitchen at Kerrang, and my uncle was there and he was in a blue polo shirt with white trim. And he said, "Where's Cheryl?" And I said, She's moved. She's moved back to Melbourne and now we've got her a place near us." And I said, "Which of your kids should we trust if things go pear-shaped with your will?" And at the time, all of his kids were lined up behind him. He said to me, "Don't tell Cheryl I was here." And then he looked back at all of his kids and then he just looked back at me and I said, "Which one do we trust? Who is the trustworthy one of your kids?" And he just looked back at them again and he looked at me and then I woke up. And I was like, instantly, I was like, "Oh my God, that is so weird." And I called my dad and I said, "I feel like I've just had a visit from Max." Dad was all like, "Ooh," going along with it. So I just sort of passed it off,
Carley's father arrived for his second visit to the property.
My dad went up there and he cleaned up the whole of the property. Where we had piled up all the rubbish was in the little back patio area and had it taken away. He then swept the area and there was really nothing left there apart from some leaves and a little bit of dust, and everything else was gone. It was Sunday night. I think Dad called me and said, "Oh, I think that I've got a ghost story for you." And he said, "Well, I cleared out the house. I got rid of everything. I emptied the entire property and I got it ready for the cleaners next weekend. After I'd cleared the property, I said, 'Max, if you're here, give us a sign.'"
Oh dear.
And I said, "Oh, Dad, you didn't. You kind of invited it." He left the property and he had a couple of things and errands to run and goodwill runs to do and all of that stuff. And he was going to go back to the property one last time before he came back to Melbourne. And he goes, "When I returned, there was something screwed up on the ground in the patio area." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I'll send you a photo." And he sent me a photo of the scene. And there was like this screwed up bit of paper. And when I kind of zoomed in on it, it actually looked like a screwed up photograph. And I said to Dad, "Is that a photograph?" And he goes, "Yes." And I said, how did that get there? And he goes, well, this is the question. Because when he'd left, that area was clear of anything. There was nothing around, there was nothing like that around when he left. And I began to then get a really strange feeling. And I said, what was the photo of, Dad? So he'd taken a picture of the screwed up item on the ground and then he'd unfolded it. And it is a picture of Cheryl and Max at a Christmas many years ago, looking really happy. And they were smiling, and it was clearly a photo from, in happier times.
Don't worry, we have it. I posted it on our Instagram page.
Anyway, Dad and I kind of, talked about it and we're like, what does this mean? How could it get there? We were going through all the possible theories as to how this picture ended up in this position. Well, I will try and find the logical explanation at first. There was no plausible explanation. Given that we'd emptied the house of all of that, we thought, is it Max saying, yes, I'm here, that thank you for looking after Cheryl? We really just couldn't explain. Over the next couple of weeks, I started to experience some things at home. And at first, little things would happen. I had lived alone for the last 4 years, had never experienced anything untoward or anything paranormal in this house. I've got a dog as well and a cat, and I've never had any incidents where I've had to question what's going on. Is that something paranormal? First thing that I remember happening was the TV came on at 2 a.m. The TV in my bedroom had come on. I had owned this TV since 2012, never had an issue with it. And the remote sat on my bed head above my bed. And the light from the TV woke me up. And I thought, what's going on there? This has never happened. Maybe I've put it on timer by accident or I've hit something, and so I actually went through and checked the settings and there was nothing. It's 2 a.m. I'm half asleep. I'm just like, turn it off. 10 minutes later, it came back on again.
Creepy, right?
Again, went through the menu, looked at everything. So I just turned it off again.
But then it got creepier.
I began to hear strange sounds around the house, and often there are just odd sounds that I can't explain, just like taps, shuffling sounds, low murmuring sounds. I was in the lounge room and I heard what sounded like some chatter, a low muttering in the front bedroom, which was my bedroom. So I went down, TV's not on, there's nothing in the room. The chattering's now stopped.
And then it got even creepier.
I got home one day from work and I've got a small sort of round glass dining table with 4 fabric chairs. And when I came in that day, one of the chairs was knocked over. And I'm thinking, the cat is nowhere near strong enough to be able to do that. The dog is, he's 8, he's not a puppy, he's not jumping off couches. He's never done anything to jump up on the chair and knock it over. Couldn't understand it.
Carley couldn't decide if she was making this ghost story up in her head.
Is this me or is this actually happening? It's like these things were making me question my own. Am I a little bit stressed? Am I overworked? Am I a bit tired?
But she wasn't.
The activity continued to ramp up. There was shuffling at night now, just outside my bedroom. It was like something was moving along the carpet. The same kind of shuffling appeared in the bedroom. I was in my room and I actually thought my dog must have been over between the bed and the window because that's where he likes to sometimes day nap. And I heard this movement on the carpet and I went round to give him a pat and there was nothing there. I began to question whether or not had I brought something back with me? Was something attached to the items that I had brought back? Was it Max? Was it something else? What had I brought into the house unknowingly? You know, I think about it now, like every good ghost story has that whole, you know, you never should take anything from, you know, a house, you know, things can attach. And at the time, I was just like, oh, that's a good TV and that's a good freezer and I'll take these diaries and be responsible. Pulled the diaries out and I began just looking through them again. There wasn't anything salacious in them, more about, you know, the cost of fuel or the tasks that Max had done that day. And then I thought, well, they are personal thoughts and writings from him. Maybe he's attached to them.
Then something happened that made her think this was not her Uncle Max.
And then I suppose the really big thing that happened that really kind of freaked me out and still to this day happens. I was in bed and I was asleep. It was like that really weird time between 3 and 4 in the morning where you're almost getting ready to wake up, but you're coming out of your deep sleep. My body clock would have been preparing to properly wake me up. I was laying on my side. All I remember was it felt like my cat had jumped onto the bed and was slowly walking up from the end of the bed, was walking up next to me. And this was the first time something like this had ever happened. And in my brain, I was recognising that's my cat, Oscar. My cat was walking up on the left side of me. And then my brain began to compute, I guess, and I was like, hang on, my cat is actually in the laundry in his bed. When I guess, had that thought, Oscar's in the laundry, that left me with the question of what the hell is on my bed and what is crawling up next to me. This pressure continued and it came right up beside me. And then all of a sudden I felt this burst of air in my face. I felt my hair lift off the side of my shoulder and I felt my hair blow back. There's got to be a window open. Checked them all. Nothing was open. And I just thought, that was so weird. What was that?
Carley couldn't believe what she had experienced. Over the next few months, she continued to have these experiences where she'd feel an entity crawl up beside her in bed, the pressure of it waking her up most nights, and she didn't know what was going on.
I tend to forget that sometimes that this happens. I mean, I'm quite busy. I'm doing a university degree. I work full-time, socialising, all of that sort of stuff, right? So I sometimes forget in my day-to-day, but every now and then I find a little sign or something happens that reminds me that there's this situation occurring. I'll either have an instance at night where it makes an appearance or something will happen, whether it's the TV, something electrical, something out of place.
These experiences would differ from one to another.
I think it moves around, so it comes up the end of the bed, it crawls up, and then I felt like it was like it was standing next to me. And previous to this, minutes before, my dog Harvey likes to sleep on the floor at the foot of the bed, on my side. I'd actually heard him get up and leave, but I'd heard him settle on the rug just outside the bedroom. I'm conscious of that, and then within minutes, I was then in this sleep thing with this thing crawling up the bed, standing next to me, this pressure coming at me. In that moment, though, I was lucid enough to know that my dog was just within reach, and if I called out maybe to the dog, would that do something? Would that spook this, whatever it was, off? Would it change the situation? My mind was saying, call out, call out, call out for Harvey. And I was trying to, but it was like I was stuck. But it's like I am like heart's pounding. I'm frightened. I am spooked. I'm like, I have to literally talk myself down and regulate my nervous system.
Creepy, right?
It's not just me, you know. The cat, often he'll sit there staring at something. He'll moan. He'll look at something and I'll be like, what can you see that I can't? You know, it hasn't tried to communicate as such with me. I've had thoughts of, you know, it wanted to tell me that the money was in the blue coat, you know, like some kind of weird message. I've had thoughts of bringing someone into the house to try and actually make contact to see if there is actually something that it wants to say. I kind of sometimes think maybe it'll just be with me forever. So we've sort of learned to coexist. Now, I was telling someone at work about all of this. It somehow just came up in conversation and she said to me, you should get a medium. You should talk to a medium. A friend at work actually gave me the phone number of someone she was friends with who was a medium. I spoke to this woman, I called her that night and I said, look, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just a bit stressed, overworked. And I took her through all of the things that had happened and she said, oh no, you've definitely got something going on. You've got something that's trying to get your attention. It's almost mischief in a way, but they're trying to get your attention. And I said, well, is there a specific message for me? Or do they want to tell me something or show me something? Or are they just looking to be mischievous? And she said, well, look, I don't know, but it sounds like you've definitely brought something back. Just assumed that it must have been Max. And she said, well, why does it have to be Max? And I said, well, who else would it be? And she said, well, did you say that the house was, 100 years old? And I said, yeah, the house was like really old and, you know, a bit creepy. And she said, well, maybe it's someone else. Now, I didn't know anything about any of the previous tenants before my aunt and uncle. People either are going to be skeptics and they're going to say, oh, no, there's an explanation for that. If it's happening, though, it's happening.
This medium had a couple of methods to offer to Carley to help keep the peace in her home.
The medium gave me some words to say and told me to sage the house. I said the words that she gave me, and I think it was something like, this isn't your house and you need to move on now and that sort of stuff. And so I went around the house and saged and did all of that. And the activity kind of stopped. So the TV, the chair, the shuffling, the murmuring, all of that kind of phased out and stopped. But what did continue was the nighttime stuff with the pressure on the bed. It's sort of on an ad hoc basis. There's no schedule to it. Something will jump onto the bed and walk up the bed beside me. Sometimes it moves to the other side. Really intense pressure, and I'm lucid enough in this situation to know, oh, this is happening again. I recognize it. And that's happened numerous times now. I have gone down Reddit forums about sleep paralysis. I have looked up all kinds of things trying to understand what this is. But my question is, what is the difference between sleep paralysis and something paranormal? Where do you draw the line? How do you differentiate?
Sleep paralysis and paranormal experiences share striking parallels, often blurring the line between science and the supernatural. Both involve sensations of an unseen presence, shadowy figures, and a feeling of intense dread. People experiencing sleep paralysis report being unable to move, sometimes accompanied by hallucinations of entities pressing down on their chest, very similar to demonic visitations or ghostly encounters. The eerie, dreamlike state of sleep paralysis can mimic paranormal activity, making it hard to distinguish between a neurological event or something otherworldly. This overlap fuels the belief that some ghostly encounters might actually be the mind caught between sleep and wakefulness, but I don't think it's definitive.
I don't know if it's still something visiting me at night, but that still continues. And just recently with Halloween, after I'd spoken to you on the phone, it had died down for a while and then things began to pick back up. Just recently, the TV came on by itself again in the middle of the night. I had been talking about it and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. On the night of Halloween, some people might say this is really stupid. I said, if you're here, give me a sign. And I almost challenged it to do something. I did not sleep a wink because something tap danced across my bed the whole night.
Well, we all knew that was going to happen, but it did get worse.
And it was tap dancing over my shoulders and it was dancing across there was so much movement and pressure on the bed. It's always just been one time I've woken up, gone back to sleep or gotten up or whatever. I can tell you I was awake 11, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 5 a.m. from this experience. It's not even safe to sleep.
Her dog Harvey also sensed this uprising of activity.
Harvey, restless as well, in and out, all night, back and forth, out of the bedroom, in the bedroom, out of the bedroom. He didn't get much sleep either. If he's not sleeping and he's moving around as well, it's not just me.
Although Carley was always hesitant to speak about her situation, there was one time when opening up about it helped her know she was not alone in her experiences.
My best friend and I were actually going on a ghost tour of a suburb called Williamstown here in Melbourne. We started off at this pub because apparently it was reported to be haunted. We ended up talking to one of the customers who lived in the apartment above the pub. She's like, oh yeah, my apartment is haunted. She said that she experiences gusts of wind, children's feet running around. She's been asleep and she's felt someone go, you need to wake up. There was apparently a fire in this premises many, many years ago. And so I said to her, so, last night was Halloween. I'm just wondering, how did you sleep? And she goes, oh, I didn't get any sleep. And I said, me too. And I told her, and we sort of shared war stories. And we both joked, yeah, well, the veil's at its thinnest, it's not surprising. I don't think it's malicious. It hasn't tried to hurt me. Definitely a presence here of some kind. I did say the night after Halloween, when I got home from that ghost tour on the Friday night, I actually climbed into bed and I said, listen, no funny business tonight, all right? And I slept like a baby at night. In terms of clearing out a property and the person is deceased, I don't know if it's a wise idea to bring things back with you because you may just bring something else home with you.
A very special thanks to Carley, who called in from Melbourne, Australia, to share her story. Craving more spooky tales? Check out the lineup of fascinating shows on SpectreVision Radio. Channel available on Apple, streaming on Spotify, and available wherever you listen. Do you have a story you've been hiding? Submit it to us at hello.geist.podcast@gmail.com. Geist is edited and narrated by Danielle Matar. Original music and FX by Beau Jensen. Sound by Adam Esker. Geist logo is by Jake Carruthers. Follow us on all social media platforms at Geist_podcast. We want to say thank you to our fans that always anxiously wait for our episodes. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, sleep tight.